Welcome back to my channel and welcome back to day 9 of Vlogmas. So today I thought it'd be fun to share a little bit about my own carving process when it comes to creating my own stamps. I pretty much only use my own carved stamps in a lot of my artwork, my art journaling, my mixed media surfaces, even when I'm making patterned paper. I shared previously in Vlogmas some of the handmade gift tags that I make, and I used my stamps for this process as well. It's really fun to have them on hand, and it's really fun to use them in different projects. And so I wanted to start by sharing with you a few of the things that I really enjoy using. My favorite surface to carve are these soft, flexible carving blocks. You can buy them in sheets, cut them up into different shapes and sizes. Sometimes I will use them alone, other times I will mount them onto craft foam or anything stable for my stamping process. You can cut into them with a craft knife, a chisel, a carving tool. I keep a variety of carving tools on hand, everything from printmaking chisels to always having a craft knife or an X-Acto knife on hand. There's a lot of different carving tools out there. I will be putting all of my favorite supplies in the description box, but I always suggest starting with something simple like a printmaking or carving chisel for this process because you can use it in a variety of different ways. You will see mine is shaped like a V. This one's my favorite one, and it's got a wooden handle, and I can carve into that soft material. Now, I always like to brainstorm and draw out my designs. If you're new to carving your own stamps, I always like to suggest starting with really simple shapes and designs, and then as you get used to it, you can get more detailed with the entire process. I'm always finding inspiration around me, and I love jotting down my designs, sketching things out. I have sketchbooks full of different stamp designs that I end up using. But something you can actually do if you are creating your own hand carved stamps is to create a transfer of that design. And the way that I like to do this is by taking another sheet of paper and tracing that design directly onto it. Then using just a lead pencil, I'm going to really darken up my design with my pencil, and then I'll end up scribbling over the back of that design. This is going to enable you to really lightly transfer that design to the surface of your carving material. Now, I actually prefer to draw directly onto my carving blocks, but this is a great way to transfer something if you don't want to turn around and redraw it. Now, the trick for doing this is having something that you can really press down into that design. You are going to add that paper to the top of your carving block or that carving surface. I'm just using a ballpoint pen to then trace over my entire design, really heavy-handed. So I am pressing down so that it will transfer lightly my artwork, that design, onto my carving block. And because that lead on the back of my paper was very light, my transfer is going to be very, very light, but I will often go right back over the top and trace around it, get it really dark so I have a good outline that I can follow. Again, I tend to basically draw directly on the top of my carving block. I like to just have my sketchbook on hand and I use it for reference, but if anybody out there is just not ready to commit to drawing to the top of that carving surface, you can absolutely use this transfer technique to get a very, very light impression to begin with. Now is the time to start carving, and something I just want to say before I jump in is that you always have to be really careful with those carving tools. A good rule of thumb is to try really hard not to carve towards yourself because you don't want to cut yourself or get into any accidents. I will say that I've been doing this for the past 30 years and I'm pretty comfortable with the way that I hold my tools and materials. Once you really get the hang of carving, the way it feels, how safe you can be with that surface and those materials, even how soft or hard those carving surfaces are, you can really figure out what way works best for you to hold your carving tool and how to position that carving surface. I do break the rules myself over here in my own process. There are times where I will carve towards my fingers and hands. I often have people comment about that in some of my videos or things that I share on social media, and I just have to give my little warning that you just always want to be careful and figure out what works best for you. Now, in my own carving process, when it comes to creating stamps, I actually like things to look like they are hand carved. So I often am going for lots of lines or texture. I like my edges to show through. I really like it to feel, even if it's a teeny tiny stamp, like it was done by hand. If I wanted a stamp that was perfect, I would go out and buy rubber stamps or have my own designs made into rubber stamps. But when I am hand carving things, I really enjoy rough edges, things being a little bit wonky here and there, almost looking a little bit like a block print and less like a traditional rubber stamp. And I tend to be all over the board when it comes to my designs. Sometimes I keep things really simple. Other times I will go in with lots of different lines, details, carving away a lot of that surface. Something to really think about if you are wanting to carve stamps is how you want things to look. Thinking about where that ink will end up once you ink things up, thinking about the relief of that design, the design or the part of the design that stands up and will kind of have all of that paint or ink on it. These are all really good things to think about as you begin planning your designs, figuring out how you want them to look, and then as you get used to the process, you can start thinking about how you can perhaps pair those designs together or scatter them on a surface, or even start to build interesting pattern or repeat designs. Working within a square or a tile is a really fun way to use a design on its own or as a way to create a surface that has a lot of pattern. When I'm working in a square, I know that I can use it in a couple of different ways. I can create patterned surfaces, patterned paper. You can alter the direction of that design and play around with tiling on that surface. I always like to suggest working inside of a very simple shape like a square, a circle, or a rectangle if you're just getting your feet wet carving your own stamps, because this will give you a lot of potential when it comes time to ink things up and create on that surface. Like many of the things I create and the different surfaces I work on, I am not concerned one single bit about perfection when it comes to carving my own stamps and using them on different surfaces. I'm not a traditional stamper, nor do I want to be. I really like seeing stamps as being something that I can utilize within layers of mixed media surfaces, that I can combine with other supplies, that I can use to create paper that I might turn around and cut up and use in collage. And so my own process might look a bit messier from the carving of my stamps to how I use them than other artists working with stamps out there. And for me, this even translates to how I ink things up. I'm less concerned about getting a crisp, clean, clear impression of my stamp, but really playing around with imperfection in that stamping process, especially if I am using them within layers of a surface or if I am creating some kind of paper with a lot of surface design or repeat pattern. I really enjoy using my stamp carving tools and extra time that I have in my schedule throughout the year to sit down and create just as many different stamps as I can, and then I will use those throughout the year. And I really like to plan the designs or the theme that I'm working with. I'll pull out my sketchbook and pull out some of my design ideas that I have collected over time and really sit down and give myself a good day to carve like a little collection of stamps that I can keep on hand throughout the year to use in all of my different projects. I really find that creating my own stamps gives me just one more element in my work that is just authentic to me. They're my designs, my doodles, and I can incorporate them into all of my different projects. And while I know this process might not be for everybody out there, it might be easier to go purchase your own stamps for your work, it really is a fun way to pull a little bit more authenticity into your work, where all those designs are your own. They're not something you bought at the store or purchased from somewhere else. They are something that you used and turned into your own unique stamp. I have baskets full of my own hand-carved stamps that actually last for a very, very long time. Some of my stamps that I have in my studio, I've had for like 15 years. If you take care of them, if you clean them, and you go easy easy on that surface when it comes to the process of stamping, you can really make them last for a very long time. And I know there's a lot of people out there who like to use their stamps when they are mounted onto something. And me personally, sometimes I mount my stamps, other times I do not mount them because I like the flexibility of that carving block. So because I'm working on a lot of mixed media projects, because I often use acrylic paint, ink, and a variety of alternative things to stamp with, I actually prefer some of that flexibility. I also work on fabric with stamps like this, and so sometimes it's helpful for me not to mount them because I can really press down. I can kind of push them into that fiber if I'm working on fabric or canvas, and it just works different for me and my own process. Other times I will mount them. Anything from a mounting block to a piece of wood. I even use craft foam to mount my stamps. And something I actually like doing is using adhesive spray to mount them onto a surface because I can always remove that stamp and move it to another surface if I want to mount it onto something else. It's kind of a fun thing to utilize because you can move those stamps around over time without things being permanent. And since I do not approach stamping in a traditional way, I really enjoy pushing the boundaries and seeing how far I can use my hand-carved stamps in a variety of different ways. Everything from using them over the top of an acrylic painting, using them on canvas, in my journal. I really like seeing all the different ways that I can use some of my hand-carved designs and really push that creativity in a bunch of different ways. I'm notorious for dipping them into paint, using them with an ink pad. I will even use watercolor paint with my stamps. It's really fun to push the tools and boundaries in a variety of different ways. There are no rules that say you just need to use an ink pad when it comes to stamping, especially if you're interested in mixed media surfaces. So I'm going to let you watch me finish up a couple more designs, then I am going to just mess around with them real quick on a couple of different surfaces. I'm hoping this little video inspires you to perhaps try out a little bit of stamp carving, or if this is something you already do, to perhaps explore ways that you can push the boundaries with those stamps and how you can use them on a variety of different surfaces with different tools, materials, and supplies.